Do 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 do. Hello, everybody. I'm here with Forrest Tower. Um, we're going to talk about the current situation on the ground in Tumbler Ridge. We're getting started a few minutes late, but we should have some good updates. I'm just waiting until people actually start to join. So I'm at my campsite in uh, where am I? Prince George. That's the city that I'm in. And it's raining outside, which is why I'm inside. So I'm at my third secret lair. I see people starting to pop in, so why don't we get this going? Forrest, how are things going there in Tumbler Ridge?
Things are going good. Similar to Prince George, it's raining here in town. I'm at the Tumbler Ridge Airport right now, so in my car doing this update. But overall, things are going really well, actually. Similar to the discussion we had on the last call, things haven't progressed in a negative direction at all. So the fire is still holding 4 kilometers east of Tumbler Ridge. We've seen a little bit of activity in and around the wind farm, but more north up Highway 52. And so we aren't anticipating really any challenges to that eastern flank. I know my Wi-Fi might be a bit spotty, so I'll try and if I cut out, just interrupt me and I'll answer any questions at that point. But we're able to still work really close to the fire right now on that west side. So with the rain today, we're really almost doing direct attack at this point in and around the wind farm and east of Bear Hole Lake Road. The slop over across Highway 52 north, that's pretty much been dealt with, and the rain will kind of do the rest of the work that needs to be done on that tiny little excursion. Overall, we didn't see as much activity even on the eastern side as we were anticipating yesterday. So there was definitely some more fire behavior again on that eastern side in the Boot Lake area. We were expecting it to do a bit more of a run towards One Island Lake, and it actually never materialized. We did see a bit of growth on that side, but nothing like we were anticipating given the wind forecast that we had. So on this fire, really promising work that was done yesterday and the downturn in weather. We're getting at the point right now where we're looking at beginning the process of demobilizing some of the structure protection, actually. So that's the phase of the fire we're in right now. Is there still will be structure protection in Tumbler Ridge. We'll still have fire engines and that kind of stuff available. But in terms of that full setup, the last time we talked, where they were running that whole exercise, some of that gear is being demobilized just given the reduction in wildfire risk. So the phase that we're in a fire at this point is less wildfire risk. And so now it's the local authority that's looking at needing some time to do some logistical things on their end. So the BC Wildfire Service, we recommend to, in this case, the District of Tumbler Ridge, we do a risk assessment based on wildfire risk. And so where we are on the west flank right now of this fire, which would be the primary area of concern to Tumbler Ridge, is there is a lower wildfire risk at this point. We aren't anticipating that to change in the next few days. And this fire is going to be around, honestly, throughout the summer, unless we get a significant amount of rain further into June or, somehow in July or August. There's really not the ability to have extinguishment necessarily on this whole fire in the near term. But the area of concern that we really have been focusing on that west flank, that's to the point where now we are less concerned about it moving in a western direction, even if in the next couple of weeks we do see an increase in winds pushing the fire, trying to push the fire west. So lower wildfire risk. And now we're working with the District of Tumbler Ridge. They, on their side as a local authority, need to think about when we're talking about the evacuation order. There's obviously a high presence of structure protection that, like I mentioned, is beginning the process of demobilizing. There's hoses laid on the ground across people's driveways that sometimes you can't drive over. There's, lots of other stuff that needs to be worked on logistically. So we're in, I would suggest, the the very short term in terms of those discussions with Tumbler Ridge in terms of recommendations to downgrade orders. There will be an alert for sure for some period of time. But we're in that shorter term window with the District of Tumbler Ridge, working in coordination with them to ensure that there's a safe reentry plan for everyone, as well as obviously us as the subject matter expert on wildfire risk. So that's kind of where we're at with the fire right now. Before I take questions, I'll just mention the other fire that we're managing, which might be of interest, the Peavine Creek wildfire. So yesterday, we conducted some pretty significant planned ignitions on the southern part of that. We were able to bring the fire right down to our southern machine guard. So a fairly extensive planned ignition operation that went successfully. Crews stayed late in the night to finish that off into the early morning hours. And so that really reduced the ability for that fire to move further south if and when we do see anything trying to move south on that fire. Obviously, of concern would be Kelly Lake, which is south of the Peavine Creek wildfire. So on both fires, the areas of sort of imminent critical concern that we've been dealing with since Tuesday, we're feeling much better in terms of the work and this downturn in weather. So we're at the point where we're engaged in discussions with the District of Tumbler Ridge and Peace River Regional District. Again, I'll just stress that we as the BC Wildfire Service can offer a risk assessment to local authorities in terms of current and forecast wildfire risk. And then it's up to them as a local authority to determine all the other things their legislated responsibility is to have done before we would or before they would suggest reduction in order and alert based on our recommendation that they would go forward. So long spiel, but things are looking very optimistic. Less concern on that western flank. And we're now in the kind of very short term of talking with the District of Tumbler Ridge in a matter of days or less. I can never stick to a timeline because it's actually not our decision as the BC Wildfire Service when orders and alerts change. Once that recommendation goes in from us, which at this time, that's the kind of the discussions we're having, is talking to them about wildfire risk and talking to them about, how confident we're feeling on that side. It is a conversation that we're having with them. But it's ultimately their decision as they are the issuing authority of that order. And so, things are definitely looking good at this moment. So I think we're expected to receive up to 18 mils of rain on this fire, which would, at this point, the fire behavior analyst, his growth models and projections are suggesting that would have a 2 to 3 day impact on much lower fire behavior. If we don't see significant amount of rain in 2 to 3 days time, fuels will have dried out again, and we'll most likely still continue to see activity on that eastern flank. We will probably see some growth on that eastern side throughout the next few weeks into the summer months. But again, areas of critical concern on the two fires, feeling better. Final thing I'll mention is the One Island Lake area. We did have structure protection, a heavy presence in there yesterday in anticipation of further growth. It didn't grow as much as we were anticipating, which is great. And so we will continue to have that structure protection there as long as needed. Again, this is going to give us a 2 to 3 day window to potentially do some more work in and around the eastern, southern, and western and northwestern flank, which is kind of the areas we don't want it to spread further into. And so I will stress, though, even once we get to the point where an order would be downgraded to an alert, there's going to be a wildfire burning near this community for several weeks, if not months into the summer. Smoke is going to be visible. There might even be columns of smoke visible from that further eastern side. So just wanting to prepare people for that eventuality, that you're still going to know that there's a wildfire nearby. And so that's why that alert is really important. We obviously don't want to put people back in their homes and then have to suggest that they leave, but there still will be an alert in place, which means you do need to be prepared to leave at any point if and when the fire does pick up. I mean, again, there's potentially 4 months left for this fire to do its thing. So it's not like we're in a place where this is mid-July to late August and we'd feel confident about fall and winter kind of doing its thing and really diminishing fire activity. There's a lot of time left for this fire to continue to burn. What we're feeling confident about is that it has a much less chance of interfacing with Tumbler Ridge as we go forward. So I'll leave it there. If there's any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer those.
Awesome. We've been having a bunch of people either asking me or just chattering on Facebook around some of the data that's coming out of the satellite maps. Oh, there's a fire over by the co-op, or there's this, or there's that. Did you want to speak a little bit to how much faith people should be putting into, say, the NASA maps or other
Sure.
satellite sources?
You bet. Yeah. So both. So there's the NASA firms that people can kind of Google and get. There's a U.S. Canada fire map. Uh, People might also be familiar with MODIS, which is a kind of another tool that you can actually put into Google Earth, and they also have a website. Both of those, how they work is they're looking at heat detection from satellites, and so usually they're actually fairly accurate, but where they can be inaccurate is where there's heavy amounts of smoke. The fire will actually reflect heat under that smoke. And so it can often actually overestimate when you're looking at all those little dots. It can overestimate where those heat signatures are actually coming from because the heat is kind of being held down under that smoke. And it gives it the impression that the fire is much larger than it actually is, or that there would be kind of anomalous hot spots outside of the fire where in this case there's actually two right now that should be still showing on NASA firms and or MODIS. So on the western flank, there's two kind of hot spots that are well outside of where the rest of them are around the fire, and those aren't accurate in this case. So that's a good example of those are great tools. We use them in the wildfire service extensively. We also use other satellite services that we have access to. Most of them are all public in terms of people's ability to see them. We certainly use those and rely on those, especially in the early phases of a fire where we might not have really good accurate mapping, again, given visibility if helicopters haven't been able to fly around. So certainly they're really useful tools. They are interesting, especially when you're looking at a fire like this that is impacting a community. I would suggest though that it is very common though that they do have inaccuracies, especially when I've mentioned when there's heavy smoke that's laying in the area and or cloud cover, and so it's usually good if you are seeing those. Try and call someone at the wildfire service. If you have a friend or someone who's a bit more savvy with those kind of tools and can kind of give you a bit of insight, it's not that complicated. You just have to look at a lot of fires where MODIS and firms is being used, and you eventually kind of get a sense of when there might be some inaccuracies. So they're not always perfect, but they are a good tool. And when you can see kind of spots well ahead of the main bulk of all those little dots, it's usually good to question if those are actually accurate and to just see if you can contact someone from BC Wildfire Service and or a fire department if it happens to be burning within a fire department's jurisdiction as well. And they can usually provide some interpretation into that. Usually our perimeters are a few days behind always because we have to get our, it might be too smoky for us to fly and get accurate. Helicopters have to fly. They go into our plan section. Plan section applies them to Google Earth. Then that gets pushed to our dispatch system. Then that gets pushed everywhere else publicly. So there's a bit of a delay for sure in terms of us getting super accurate perimeters. Once we're at an established incident like this point, perimeters should be fairly accurate going forward. We have the appropriate resources in terms of helicopters, people that can take the time to track the fire accurately instead of, initial concerns are immediate response and operational. The perimeter isn't as important to us because we can see the fire. We know where we're working in. But at this point going forward, our perimeter should be pretty accurate. And if there are any slop over areas or areas like where it crossed Highway 52, we will still track that as little red circles in our perimeter. So going forward, I would say the perimeter will be definitely more updated often, and it's pretty accurate once we get this track of the growth from 2 days ago, and then as well the ignition that we did yesterday on 644, the Peavine Creek wildfire. So they're good, but you definitely do, if you're not familiar with the tools, often sometimes some interpretation is helpful with them.
Awesome. You said that you've been doing ignitions on Peavine Creek. Have you managed to get any done in the Tumbler Ridge area?
No, we were hoping to get some done yesterday again on that west flank, but the winds were just not in the right direction, so we weren't able to carry those out in achieving the objectives that we would want to achieve. I have been talking about trying to burn from east of Bear Hole Lake Road on the guard we were trying to construct there. I'm sure people are more familiar with this area, and so the ground is really saturated with water right now, which is wild because heavy equipment is actually really slow in building that guard. They were only able to get about 300 meters in a day because they aren't able to get into some areas because the ground is so saturated, the equipment's too heavy, and yet we have the issue that all the trees are so dry that we have extremely vigorous fire activity. So a bit of a challenge on both sides there. So we had to kind of pivot, and we've been still trying to build guard where we can on that west flank. It's just not as expansive as we were hoping to get from 52 all the way down to the Kiskatna FSR down Bear Hole Lake Road. We've been able to get where we can, where we feel we need to. And then just given the downturn in weather, we've switched to direct attack in that area. Unit crews have been in there doing some more close work right against the wildfire's edge. And yesterday we didn't do the ignitions that we might have needed to or wanted to if the winds were pushing perfectly in our favor. Again, the decision to do that so close to a community isn't taken lightheartedly, so we really need permissions to carry that out safely. So we didn't do any ignitions yesterday on 645, the West Kiskatna River wildfire. The big operation was on Peavine Creek, and right now it's not anticipated that we'd be doing any more ignitions that are needed along that west flank. It's at a good point at this point in terms of what our crews are able to do on the ground. And as well, in and around that wind farm, we're working with Capital Power. They have their people there in terms of some danger tree assessors and followers working in the area. So all that critical infrastructure is also being managed from our partners that assist us.
Awesome. Now you talk about the protections that are going in place for Tumbler Ridge. If in the next 3 or 4 or 2 or 6 or 20 days, the community is able to get back in. The fire is still burning along Highway 52 North. What are the dangers there?
Yeah, actually, so that area is looking quite good. The area that if you're driving north from Tumbler Ridge on the left-hand side, if you're driving south from Dawson Creek on the right-hand side, that's where it crossed, and that is pretty much extinguished at this point. So I've driven that road almost every day. There's actually no hazards on the road itself. No trees fell, and the power lines, they weren't severely impacted along that route. So there is risk if you decide to get out of your car and walk into the wildfire on the left-hand side if you're coming from Dawson, and on the right-hand side if you're coming from Tumbler Ridge. The main, obviously, head of the fire is east of that Highway 52. I would suggest not going into there, but if you're just driving on the road, there's not really a lot of hazard at this point. We'll have had our danger tree assessor followers deal with any danger trees right along the highway. So you're going to drive past a wildfire for, I don't know how long it is, about 1 kilometer or 2. But there's no risk actually on the actual highway. That has been mitigated. Again, the timeline for reentry, whenever the community is able to go back in based on Tumbler Ridge's decision, I would suggest is, we're nearing the quite short term. Whenever that lines up with a rebuilding of a ridge in terms of warmer weather and potentially some more increased fire behavior, realistically, you will probably see fire on your right-hand side, leaving Tumbler Ridge, your left-hand side coming from Dawson. You're going to see smoke in that area, but the forecast is that should still be kind of driving east, and so the wind direction isn't going to be moving it towards the highway. Again, the issue that I'm running into right now is it's still only mid-June, and so we have a lot of months left. I cannot say for certain that Highway 52 won't be impacted again at some point in the future if this fire does decide to spread in a north or northwest direction. And if and when that does become the case, it'd be the same procedure. We would shut down the highway, and we'd have flaggers. Like, you'll know if it's unsafe. We'll have people there to either pilot you, etc. So right now, it's not dangerous to drive on as soon as we're able to safely open that road. The reason it's closed primarily now is, yes, there was a wildfire that crossed it. We had to deal with that. But our crews have been working right off of the highway. And so it's still, it's a work site. Uh, it's difficult when we're working and then the local authority usually has to provide assistance for us to provide flaggers. So it's just much safer for us if we can close down a road and have our crews able to work off of the highway. We have fire trucks providing water that are kind of going up and down that road a lot. So once it reopens, it's safe to drive on at this point, and no short term impacts to that road that we foresee at this time.
Okay, and then for some of the other roads, I know that for instance, people like to take the Bear Hole or the Hourglass slash Noel roads to Grand Prairie, and the fire has definitely crossed those roads. Is there going to be closures? How are people like?
Yes.
How will people know where they can go in the backcountry that's outside the current area restriction, which is a little bit farther south?
Yeah. So that's again some of that like logistical work that has to happen now that I was talking about in terms of allowing people back into the area. So ideally, we'll get signage everywhere. I would suggest uh, knowing where the fire perimeter is, which you can find out through the app, or you can also find some layers usually that you can get into Google Earth, but certainly on the app or the website. Anywhere where that fire within that fire perimeter, it has been impacted, and some of those roads are quite impacted. So we try our best for main routes to do some danger tree assessing falling and flag them. Um, so a little bit of common sense probably in terms of, if you're driving in the area and it looks like you're into wildfire impacted areas, there will be issues with trees kind of coming down and everything. In the future, once winds pick up and the root systems are burnt and they can continue to fall. So it is quite dangerous. And that's why, going into the fire perimeter, even if you can drive through it on Highway 52, is not suggested. Some of the other major routes, like you're suggesting, there should be signage and or that there'll be flagging, or that it'll be quite obvious where not to go. And if we do get into a point of, usually what happens at this point is once the order is changed to an alert, any areas that we deem unsafe, we will put an area restriction on under the authority that we have as a Ministry of Forests. So that then does become our ability legally to put in an area restriction, and that is ours to enforce. And so anywhere that is unsafe to go into that is outside of the current one, we'll amend that area restriction to make sure it's really clear where we're still working and where it's still unsafe. And then the alert would reflect where it's still safe to go through, but that you still need to know you're on evacuation alert.
Excellent. I think I'm out of questions. So basically, the takeaway is that uh, things are looking positive. That hopefully discussions will be happening soon to get people back into town. Chances are it will remain under an alert for at least a few weeks, if not
At least a bit.
months.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest, possibly not months. It's really hard to tell. It's so dependent on weather. Um, but I would say it's going to be an alert for some time, and it's going to be more than a day or two after the order is downgraded. So there'll be an alert for an indeterminate amount of time. I would guess, we're talking in the manner of a few weeks, if not longer. It really just depends on what this fire does over the next couple of weeks, but an alert for sure.
Okay, perfect. And it is raining there right now, so that's always a positive sign.
Yeah, it is raining. Downturn for sure in the weather, cooler temperatures. So again, kind of, I know pretty much everyone's probably just wondering about evac order and timelines of returning to community. And again, my kind of final message is the conversations are happening to start, ensuring that that happens smoothly. And we're in the short term. Um, I hate to give timelines because I can be proven wrong, but I would say we're, in a matter of days, if not less. So for people thinking about, impacts to the next few weeks, we're not in a week situation. I would suggest, candidly, with this audience, we are, looking at days or less in terms of when that would happen. And really, again, to stress the how this works is we are confident in terms of a low wildfire risk at this point. That's not what we're concerned about from the wildfire service. There is a lot of other things that need to be mitigated after a community has been gone for a few days, or longer than that. And especially the longer that it has been, it takes a bit to get things up and running in terms of essential services, ensuring we have our area restriction ready, flagging. The structural protection folks have to get all their gear demobilized. So a little bit of time after people are probably, I know people are still in community posting pictures that it does look good at this point. There's just the other back end stuff that people might not always think of that takes a little bit of time. So days and or less is what I will commit to at this point. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. There was a question that I had coming out of there, but I seem to have forgotten it. So I will let you go. Thanks,
All good.
Forrest.
Awesome. Okay, no problem. And like I said last time, anyone can call, text, email me. Happy to chat with any specific questions you have. But thanks for hosting this, Trent.
Thank you. Yeah, and if anybody needs to get in contact with him and doesn't have his phone number or information, I do. So just send me a note. We will
Perfect.
probably be talking to Mayor Krakauka in about an hour. So we'll get the update from the district side of things. Other than that, bye. Oops.